right, good morning. So may I invite the panelists on the floor. Ms. Pema Lhamo, she's the founder of Bhutan Transparency Society and also former member of National Council of Bhutan. Jelle Wouters, he's from Royal Thimphu College and has been researching on social policies for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Mr. Daniel Fung, who's the former Solicitor General of Hong Kong, and Sonam Gyaltshen, who has been working as field officer on ground with Tariana Foundation. All right. So I think the MC has set the context already for this session, that how in the evolving times like today, especially with also the advent of AI, and Bhutan being a society that is pursuing GNH, how our social codes and laws can evolve to match the realities of our time and also to match the grassroots reality. So if I may start with Jelle, and if you can give, maybe I'll give you all 2 to 3 minutes to give your opening remarks and your ideas and suggestions on this. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for hosting this wonderful event, as well as for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm a little nervous because Dashut Sewang Tandin, my former boss, is just sitting in the third row, so I will try not to look at him too much. So my name is Jelle Wouters, and I'm serving as the Director of Research and Development at Royal Thimphu College. I've been serving in Bhutan for over a decade now, but I still feel I know very little. And for me, these 2 days are all about learning. What I want to talk about very briefly is perhaps legal innovation. I think the weakness of our legal system is that they are distinctly human-centric. They are involved with humans only. But what we see in Bhutan, in terms of the cultural and spiritual landscape, are the ingredients of what we might call more than human ethics, or perhaps a more than human social contract, or multi-species justice, in which we recognize other than humans, be they plants, be they animals, be they glaciers, mountains, or lakes, as objects of injustice, and therefore also as subjects of justice. In Bhutan, what I've learned over the years working with my colleagues and students in the various research projects we undertake is that mountains are also deities, that plants are recognized to have a certain agency, a certain intentionality, perhaps even a consciousness. And the same applies to the elements, the same applies to animals. So to think of society in the context of Bhutan is to think of a more than human society. To think of happiness is to think of more than human happiness. And yet our academic structures, our government structures, our legal structures are not necessarily open to expand the horizon of law, of ethics, and justice to other than humans. And yet, and this is my final remark, if the Anthropocene, our current epoch of socio-ecological unraveling, tells us one thing, it is that our current ethical reasoning, our current systems of thinking about justice are not equipped, or rather, they have failed us. So we can think about climate treaties, we can think about new agreements, but what we really need is a new planetary ethics. And I feel that Bhutan might have a lot to teach the world about what it might mean to pursue not just human well-being, but more than human well-being. I leave it at that, La.
It is indeed a big honor for me to be a part of this very insightful meeting in this wonderful place, the Dungkar Dzong. I hope I will be able to meet the expectations of the participants, to talk my thoughts, to share my thoughts on social codes and place-based laws for aligning GNH. So I would like to take you on a journey with me to a very remote village in Bhutan, where a community of maybe 15 households are living together. In that community, the elders are well respected. They are very happy. They are not, depressed, undergoing depression, or in need of any further support systems. They are well contained. Young children in that village are equally happy, equally satisfied, and the adults are going on with their daily chores without anybody telling them what they need to do. So this is a village in Bhutan. And if you ask why it is like that, there's harmony, there's resilience, there's happiness, and there's peace, well-being. And if you ask why it is like that, the answer lies in, I think, the social codes that are in place. The social codes which do not dictate people to behave in certain ways or not to behave in certain ways. But it is a norm of life, it is a way of behavior which has been amalgamated or which has been accumulated from various attitudes, values, and beliefs of the society. So it is a part of the way of life. Then you look at how things are managed in this particular village. People raise herd cattle. People do agriculture farming. And they also engage in religious activities. And there is no, like today we call people for meeting, this and that. There's no need of doing that. If it is the first month of the Bhutanese calendar, people know that it is Dawa Dangpa and a very auspicious religious month. Automatically, everybody starts to engage in ritual practices. And then, how these ritual practices are organized, again, there are no laws or written bylaws as such, but the community rules. This household will bring this commodity, this household, this. Everything is unwritten, but in practice, the rules are there. So they conduct that. That finishes. Come irrigation time, because it's May, June, July, paddy cultivation time. What happens is there's no confusion about the irrigation system. They have the irrigation systems put in place by the community themselves. And they know that today it is my turn to irrigate my field. Tomorrow it is my neighbor's. And similarly, so it is very smooth, the irrigation, the distribution of water is very smooth. And this is because, although no written coded laws are there, but the practice is there, rules are there. So this facilitates the conduct of any sort of activities or management of even the smallest things in the rural community. Now today, if we look at laws, we think laws are there. We tend to look at laws as very punitive and associated with punishments, rather than taking laws as a foundation for happiness, I think we must look at the values, the laws of the nature, of the country, of a village. In Bhutan, the formal laws have entered quite recently, actually. I think the first coded laws came into being since Shabdung times, and which were based on Tadamsi, Lejumde, Gewachudu, Migewachudu, all that, the spiritual beliefs. And then the formal law system in Bhutan was introduced during the time of the third king, and in the form of Timshin Chenmo. These were the formal law system. But even if then, which gradually was replaced by the constitution of the Kingdom of Bhutan with the advent of democracy in the country. So today, if we look at how things are done at the village level in more traditional manners. They still continue with the social values, codes that they uphold. A young person or anybody will remove their hat without anybody telling them if they see an elder passing by or if they see a senior passing by, citizen passing by. Today, just recently, I was driving on the roads of Thimphu, and there we have so many zebra crossings, and then people are meant to cross from that space. But if you go, you will always come across, again, people who try to cross where there's no zebra crossing. And these are, like the adherents. Why? Because I think for laws to be effective, for rules to be effective, it has to be ingrained in our value system. And how much do our people, do Bhutanese, understand the new rules, regulations, legislations being put in place by the state, by the legislatures? How many of us understand the value of these laws? So I think if we have to, and then correlating these laws with happiness, in my opinion, laws, rules, legislation should be the foundation of happiness. Because without this foundation, without this adherence to, like the rules, the regulations, the laws, the bylaws, every individual could act, could behave in whatever manner or ways one wants, and this could infringe onto the happiness and well-being of other people. So I would leave at this for the time being.
I think you raise a very important point, that how laws play a very important role in shaping the individual consciousness in the society. And we'll come back to that, but before that, I'd like to hear from you, Daniel, your thoughts on this subject.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank Bhutan for inviting me here. I'd like to thank my very good friend, Tan Sri, Andrew Sheng, through whose good offices I got involved. And I've known Andrew since 1993, and he was actually the best man at my wedding. So I owe a lot to Andrew. He's a mentor. He's also a colleague with whom I work closely. And I want to say what a privilege it is for me to be in the Kingdom of Bhutan. This is my first visit, and it's a humbling experience and a learning experience. I come from 40 years working in Hong Kong together with the People's Republic of China. I went from starting my first series of public lectures in Beijing in 1985, 40 years ago to today. So my life experience actually straddled both Hong Kong as a classical British Crown colony and now, of course, a special administrative region of China. And to me, this is a very deep learning experience. And what I learned from the past 40-odd years is the value of deep listening. I think my 11 years spent in the UK when I was growing up between 1967 and 1978 taught me a very different paradigm, the Western educational paradigm. And I ended up eventually with 2 degrees, probably too many. I ended up with a qualification as a member of the English Bar. I practiced in London at the English Bar. But coming back to Hong Kong in '78, which was the year China opened up, and this was serendipity, it was not planned. No one had any idea that Deng Xiaoping would announce in December of 1978 the opening up of China. Life is serendipity, and I got very quickly involved in the drafting of our new constitution between 1985 and 1990 as someone who knew really very little, but thinking with my Western 11 years education UK that I was an expert. Clearly I was not. So the humility that I was taught over the past 40 years is really my hallmark. It's tattooed into, I think, my soul and my spirit, and is part of my dharma. I think I was born and brought up as a member of the Church of England. I was baptized at a month old, but today I consider myself, if I may, a practicing Buddhist, because my life journey has taught me the importance of humility. The 5 years we spent drafting our constitution, the basic law, taught me that actually listening deeply is much, much more important than speaking or pontificating or showing off your Western learning. I ended up, when Chris Patton became our last governor, serving in his government. I was his Solicitor General, in fact, the first person of Chinese extraction to serve as Solicitor General in Hong Kong, which is, I guess, a shocking statement to make, because this is very, very recent history. I carried on serving the new government under C.H. Tung when Hong Kong became a special administrative region in China. I took an academic sabbatical. I taught at Harvard Law School and Yale Law School, and the bravest decision I made in my life was to transfer from Harvard to Yale. And everybody on the East Coast of the United States were shocked that I actually made that particular transition. Coming back to Hong Kong, I worked on constitution building in Laos and in Cambodia under the auspices of UNDP, together with the American Bar Association. And then I was put on the CPPCC, the national body, which is China's upper house. And I've served there for 20 years. I was termed out in 2023, so I'm now a free agent. I can speak, obviously, my mind, and the Hong Kong government has asked me to work in their Financial Services Development Council, which is a government think tank. Now, I say all this to demonstrate that life is unplanned. Destiny is unplanned, but I think there is really a deep purpose to everybody's existence, and I feel extremely privileged. I'm very grateful to Bhutan for having me here, and for me here, it's a learning process. But I'd like to share, if I may, later on in this panel, some of my insights, and hopefully they can help shed some light as to the journey, the very important journey that Bhutan is undergoing today.
Your Excellency, Dashos, distinguished speakers from both Bhutan and abroad, a very warm good afternoon. I started my career as a field officer with Narayana Foundation, and the points that I'm going to speak here would be mostly from the perspective from a person who have seen first in hand the challenges of the rural communities, the values and the ethics that binds all the Bhutanese. And through this experience, I would like to speak a bit on the social codes. Especially the Bhutanese society is very much rooted with our traditional culture and the ethics, and that really aligns with the developmental philosophy of cross-national happiness. And over the years, as we go to the rural communities and serve, we are always reminded of the values of the arena, the core values, the compassion, dignity, and the integrity. With these values, we go and serve our people who are really in need. And the values, especially in the rural context, there are certain values like Dilam Namsha. It's very prominent, and we can even see here that normally the boys wear go and women, they wear kira. And this is our traditional dress code. And other is respect to elders and the hospitality of the rural communities when they receive guests from outside. And these are some of the unique values that our rural people still practice. And among these unique values like the community help, we call it lejum and lemi. And another concept is the Shatudini. And this is something very unique that has been practiced over centuries. And now if we talk about the lejum and the dejum, it basically talks about a community help for each other, starting from construction of house to conducting a ritual. Everybody comes together as a community. And through these events, a lot of community vitality and social cohesion has been created. And even for the kids, there isn't anybody who actually dictates somebody, or especially kids, to learn and force them to acquire the values. It's the environment that they are brought up. It's a natural acquisition. It's the natural instinct that comes. And these are some of the values. And even if we look at the Shatudini, it's the voluntarily labor contribution. And it still exists in our rural communities. And these are something unique, voluntary support that community members provide within their community as well as for the government projects. And now, as a field officer, we simply don't go to the community and dictate the way of their life, but rather we go there and mobilize and facilitate their life so that whatever projects that we implement in their villages, they benefit from all the outputs that we deliver through the projects. And these are some of the things as a field officer, we try to empower those rural communities. And these are some of the values that really keeps us and sets us unique from the rest of the world. And I feel these are some of the values that we really need to inculcate and promote, and this will gradually help in promoting the 4 pillars of GNH, the conservation of the environment, the preservation of the culture, the sustainable development, and these are some of the things. that we are doing at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those wonderful introductions and remarks. To set the context and for the further discussion, the question that I would like to bring in is that in the age of Anthropocene right now, the biggest challenge in front of us is to live within planetary and social boundaries. While we have made a lot of advancement in physical technologies like in terms of AI or innovations, but social technologies or our laws has not advanced with that pace. So how the legal system can advance so that we can develop within the ecological and social boundaries of the planet and also of the bioregion, of the village and of the cities. So how can we do that? If any insights on that, yes. Sure.
So, sorry, if I may just kickstart the debate, and I'm sure my colleagues would have a lot to contribute here. I think we start with the humility of deep listening or deep observation, as we heard from the last panel. I think when I first started getting involved in China's legal modernization, China was devastated after the Cultural Revolution, which officially ended in October 1976 with the death of Mao Zedong. And at that stage, China had no laws to speak of, and 38 lawyers for a country at that stage of close to 1 billion in population. And you can see what immense, unimaginable challenges that country faced. And as somebody educated overseas in the Western milieu, Western tradition, we tend to lecture. We tend to present our point of view as the received truth from centuries following the European Enlightenment, and we thought that was the true path. What I learned was, in fact, the deep value of deep listening, because you cannot dismiss 5,000 years of civilization at one blow and say, look, just westernize. It doesn't work. And therefore, in order to start adding value to a system, you need to understand the system to begin with. You can't say, I now graft some new branches onto this 5,000-year-old tree trunk and expect those branches to flourish. That was a lesson I learned. So I learned humility. I did not learn that in my 11 years in the UK, and subsequently my years in the United States at a much older period of my life. It wasn't a particular approach that Western civilization taught us. But I think in Asia, we need to recognize the wisdom of the generations. And that deep listening is the foundation of any reform we can advocate.
Yeah, I think what I understand from you is that it is very important for us to deeply listen to the communities, to deeply observe the surroundings, and based on that, devise our social codes and laws. So just to share an example, living in Himalayas, I have observed this, and I think Sonam and Gitanjali today morning also presented that most of the buildings in Himalayas are being built by cement and concrete as materials, but that is not bioregionally suitable. And a lot of it is, the building codes were responsible for it because the building codes were devised in such a manner that they didn't control the development of such cement and concrete buildings in this region, while they must have done so. And I think that is where the deep listening and deep observation is important, that what is really important for this bioregion to develop and to develop holistically and operationalize well-being. And with that, I'll go to Jelle. Yes.
Thank you. I would like to build upon this notion of deep listening by adding that we also require a deep listening to the land. we require deep listening to mountains, to glaciers, to lake, and to other than humans. They may not necessarily speak in a language we are yet able to understand, but perhaps AI will actually help us to understand the speech of other than humans. I know of some advances in which scientists are able to gradually decode the language of whales by using artificial intelligence. So perhaps in a not so far away future, we are able to actually speak with species other than our own. But that to the side. In Bhutan, as what I have had the privilege of learning over the years, most communities know that they are not living in human-only communities. They're living together with other actors, with other agents, who are also equally part of social lives that are deeply shared. Now, ultimately, the law is a reflection of our values. What we see today is that there are tremendous advancements in technology, in artificial intelligence, and they take place in the context of the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is, as the Indian novelist Amitav Ghosh has put it, a failure of our imagination, our ability to live well together, both with fellow humans and with other than humans. It's also a failure of ethics. It's a failure of our sense of justice. So the way I see this moving forward is in terms of legal innovation and more than human justice. Opening up our legal system, opening up our justice system to the needs and the rights of beings who are not necessarily human. And there are already legal innovations in different parts of the world. In New Zealand, there is a river that is now accorded legal personhood by the government of New Zealand, recognizing it as an ancestor of the indigenous Maori. In parts of Latin America, in Colombia, Bolivia, and Ecuador, the Amazon and certain mountains are now enshrined in the constitution as subjects of rights. Closer to home, in India, there are two, or at least two glaciers who have also been accorded legal status. They are recognized as persons. And it's very strange that we have not done so earlier. After all, we are recognizing companies as legal persons. That makes actually no sense. But suddenly, when we ask to recognize mountains and lakes as legal persons, there are all kinds of objections that this is ridiculous. This is not possible. But my provocation for this session would be that the Anthropocene demands of us that we open up our way of thinking about justice and ethics beyond the narrow confines of the human. And this needs a lot of thinking, obviously. It's easier said than done. But when I speak with my students about this, I often draw the comparison to the French Revolution. 50 years before the French Revolution, the idea that all humans are born equal, that was unthinkable. That was not an acceptable idea. But after the French Revolution, that became the norm, right? And today to say that we are not politically equal is not something one is willing to say, at least not in public. So if we initiate these discussions today, perhaps in a generation or two, it will be equally common knowledge that ethics and justice should transcend the confines of the human.
Thank you, thank you. Any other comments from you?
I think my two colleagues on my left and right have covered most part of the answer to the moderator's question, but I would just like to draw our attention on the purpose of the legal system itself. Because to me, whether we have advanced along with time or ahead of time or are we behind is a very deep question, and I think there would not be any answers to that. So what I would like to draw the attention of everyone here today is what the purpose of having legal systems. What is the purpose? I think if we can define the purpose of having legal systems, then all else will evolve around that. And this also goes back to the my colleagues mentioned on importance of listening and observation. So I leave it at that.
Thank you, thank you. So now we'll open the floor for the questions, but before that, for the closing remarks, if you could think of how AI and the latest tools can, help operationalize this place-based laws at scale, how we can use latest technologies to deeply listen and deeply observe and put place-based social codes and laws together. Any questions?
Thank you for the opportunity, La. My question would go to anyone, but I would like to specifically ask the Bhutanese speakers here, La. Law and order is nothing new, especially in human civilization. And the idea of law enforcement has been there ever since humans decided to be a civilization. But in Bhutan, law and order, like specifically someone to uphold the laws, written laws, might be relatively new if you compare it to other places around the world. And my question is, why is there a generational idea of when you look at law or people who uphold the law, there's a kind of, I'm afraid of it kind of, and I may be a part of society, but I may not speak for everyone here. And a personal experience is, if I give an example, back then in Finsling, I was staying with my uncle and auntie, and the neighbors upstairs were having a fight because their younger son was intoxicated, I don't know, drugs or maybe alcohol. And I heard that there was a baby up there, and I didn't want the baby to be harmed in any way, so I was thinking about calling the police, but then again, I was afraid by the time if the police get here and they resolved it, then the police might ask, why did you call us? And I was thinking that, I would be in a position where they would ask me why I called them, so I was kind of afraid. And I think maybe other people might be afraid because they see law enforcement and they might be kind of feeling. And I wanted to know, is there a reason why this kind of, I wouldn't say generation, but this kind of view of society towards law enforcement? Because when you look at law enforcement, you're supposed to feel safe and protected rather than you see them feel scared, turn the other way around is what usually happens when I see it. Thank you, La.
Any other questions?
Say probably just to start, or having the safe harbor issues. Can you please help the community here think through this very difficult step?
Okay, just one last question there at the back.
Thanks a lot to all the speakers. And Pema Lhamo has painted such a really lovely and evocative portrait of how legal consciousness here is really grounded in practice, le jude, and understanding the relationship between people. And of course, Dr. Ruther is more than people, right? Also the environment and other creatures. And so I'm curious to hear the panel's perspective on how policymakers who are so far removed from some of these contexts by necessity and structure can appreciate these really dear binds of obligation, et cetera. Thanks, La.
With your permission, perhaps I can answer Tan Sri's question first, because I think it's a paradox of human constructs, particularly the law, which is a human construct, a social construct, that law plays catch up to societal change and to social transformation and also to technological innovation. Now, of course, in the continental tradition, European legal tradition, you tend to establish encyclopedic codes to anticipate future governance. But we know from reality it doesn't work. Otto von Bismarck, the great statesman who unified over 200 different German states in 1870-71, thought that Parliament only needs to meet once. They would legislate and they could be disbanded. Now, that was Bismarck's vision. And we understand that reality is not like that. So perhaps you could say Dharma is not like that. And therefore, to Andrew's question, can we anticipate? We try. We try, and one way we try to do this today in the 21st century, and I think Bhutan is a prime example of this, is how to do intergenerational justice. Because we know that the present generation and previous generations, going way back, definitely to the Industrial Revolution and beyond, to the Columbian voyages, 1492, when Spaniards basically devastated the New World, exploited native riches and treasures in order to boost the treasury back in old Europe, specifically in Spain, for the imperial expansion. Now, how do we break out of that mental straitjacket? I think the key is intergenerational justice, because the sins of the forefathers, including people of my generation, have to be paid for, because next gen do not accept what we do, no reason for them to. Next gen actually wants to make a difference, and I want to just root this in practicality, not just theory. In fact, in yesterday's panel discussion preceded by Sanjit's lecture, and I had the privilege of following up with them over dinner last night. In fact, the very subject they talked about, social stock exchanges, social values, and how blended finance can effect a transition into a post-carbon global economy, was the very subject discussed for 5 days at the Rockefeller Center in Bellagio, Lake Como, in which I had the privilege to lead a discussion on blended finance. So we need to think beyond the present straitjacket as to how to deal with current social economic problems. We need to look at intergenerational justice, how we make the world a better place. And I don't want to say any more because it's a very complicated subject and I don't want to take up more time. But I do think the law itself has to transition from something rigid, something as it were vertical, top down, into something that's living, that responds to social needs, and not just current social needs, but future generational needs. And that is exactly what people like my son say to me. So I'm a student, I'm a lifelong student of that particular process.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel, for that. I think it's very important, the intergenerational justice that needs to be brought. And in your closing remarks, I would like to hear that what is one practical step that we can take at this moment and how AI can help aid that in coming future?
Kickstart that response. I mean, I think we need to use AI, obviously, as a tool, not as a master, but we can use AI to map out myriad, multifarious scenarios. And we need to engineer, if we possibly can, a path forward which does not lead to annihilation and destruction. Because we need to balance equity with as it were, plurality. We cannot monopolize as Homo sapiens all the resources of this single planet of ours, and we cannot, as it were, bank on Elon Musk moving everybody to Mars, and that is not his vision either. So let's be realistic. We need to do what we can to create an equitable, just ecosystem and paradigm that allows Homo sapiens to continue and coexist with other species, because other species are also sentient, as we heard from the last panel. We cannot assume that, oh, because you can't speak English, therefore you're not human, or you can't speak any human language, therefore you're just a dog, you're nothing. That's not true. We know that. We need to have that humility.
Thank you, thank you. So we have actually run out of time, but would like your closing remarks, and in those closing remarks, if you can address also the questions that we had from two other participants on the floor. And I think, Dasha, you have a question? Yeah, also.
Thank you. I would like you to remain in the good books of our MC, our excellent moderator. You talked about artificial intelligence, was more as a poser rather than any answer. Artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. And we all talked about laws, the sanctity of law. I wish we had more time, that the laws have to be based on morality. In this age of Anthropocene, our meteorite is coming. Dinosaurs have been wiped out, which is in the form of climate change. Do we need artificial intelligence to bring law to its moral substrate? Thank you.
Closing remarks on that?
I would agree with Dasho and add that this moral substrate should include the rights and protection and agency and intentionality, not only of humans, but also of other than humans.
Not really as a closing remark, but I would also like to, I think the gentleman there asked a question specifically to the Bhutanese participants. Just like to give my thoughts on that. Why you are so afraid of law in Bhutan? I think we should ask ourselves, are our laws, and I think I go back again to the questions that I asked, the purpose of the laws, the legislations itself. If we don't understand why there are laws in the first place, how do you adhere to them? But the other issue to this is, whenever we talk of laws, regulations, we look at it from this perspective of like punishment. You do this or you get punished, and this is the punishment. From my very brief experience as a lawmaker, I think this was something, an oversight that we had. When we were so excited in, writing so many laws, I think during our time we wrote the most legislations in the 5 years that we had. You just write, without really delving, without listening, without observing, and taking examples, because most of the laws are in areas that are, I think, new to the Bhutanese context, and then we just copy-paste without contextualizing it to our systems. And how well this will be received, this will benefit the, not just the people, but the ecosystem, the Bhutanese ecosystem at a larger point. So we did that, and perhaps it is perhaps now is the time, because we are advancing into an area of being mindfulness. I think 2 days we had talks on being mindful about this, mindful about that. And perhaps now it is time to be mindful about individual rights and the rights of the other sentient beings living in that ecosystem. So I would like to leave it at this.
Moving on to the last remark, Tarayana in the last 2 decades, alongside working with the grassroots people, we have been developing bylaws, especially in context to groups that we form. And those bylaws are created and enforced by the local community to resolve the issues they face in their day-to-day life, and also to inculcate the sense of ownership within the community. And through this process, like, people are well aware of their responsibilities and the role as a community members and the role as a citizen of the country. And through this process, it's the clauses in the bylaws are all unanimously accepted and adopted by all the members in the group. And they set a certain rules that can guide their behavior and protect themselves from going against the rules within the community. Especially, the one example could be the water user group that we form in all the villages. And Tarayana has been working tirelessly to restore water in most of the villages in the country. And after we provide our targeted interventions to those communities, we sit with them, we facilitate, but we do not dictate the clauses that needs to be included in the bylaws, but rather it's their interest and their share of concern for the other members. And through this process, they elect the chairman, the secretary, the treasurer, and the plumber who will look after the water resource. And this actually guides every members in that locality to abide by the rules and then follow for the interest of the larger communities. And these values are quite important for any developmental activities, and developmental activities should start from the top, bottom up, instead of from the top. So for this matter, I would like to propose that the values that we teach the community members is very relevant, and through this process we are helping to promote the 4 pillars of GNH and 9 domains of GNH. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you very much. I hope I could do justice to this panel, given the time that I had. Thank you.